Barnaby Joyce. It shows the power of the crossbencher, doesn't it, with Jackie Lambie's deal?
It shows the power that you just called me a senator. So,
oh, senator, sorry, I'm going way back. Way back. You used to be. Former senator,
used to be
former leader, former deputy prime minister.
Nothing more X than an X, mate.
Sorry about that.
No, it's, well, obviously it's quite apparent now that the government has the numbers. And I genuinely think on both tactics and to avoid the look of sulking, that the Labor Party should have said, look, we've won the election. There's, you know, it was a policy that they took to the election. Let's clear the decks, move on and fight our next fight. The other thing is it's you want to get to that next fight. There's no point hanging around this territory where you're just losing, where everybody says, for goodness sake, mate, the election's over, you lost it, this was part of the program, move.
But, you know, I guess the reason... That was a faux pas saying senator, but in my mind I was thinking back to the days when you first were in this place, the Maverick, basically an independent, although with a Nats tie on. You operated on that basis, didn't you? And
there was a very good reason for that, Kieran. I went to an election where the Liberal Party campaigned against me, and I always remind people of that. You know, we had to win back a seat off One Nation. And I had John Howard campaigning against me on one side, Pauline Hanson campaigning against me on the other side, the Greens campaigning against me, the Democrats holding the seat. It was a tough struggle. So once I got down here on behalf of the Queensland Nationals at that stage, I made absolutely certain that people didn't take that vote for granted and it was heard. And it's later on, you almost had to do the same thing again to win back New England. So winning back a Senate seat, very similar to winning back a lower house seat. You've got to play yourself into relevance.
So you'd have respect for Lambie in that sense?
I have respect for the process of the Senate. You've got to articulate your argument in such a form as to not compromise the nation. And, you know, I'm sure that, you know, Jackie's playing a game. She'd be certainly wiser this time. When she first came in, a little bit too abrupt. I'm certain that just like Ash Barty, when you go out into the wilderness for a bit and come back, sometimes you play a much better game.
Well, surely you'd have some respect for Labor than trying to get a better deal. They were trying to get more money in people's pockets sooner.
Well, not really, Annalise. Look, we're going to have money going into people's pockets next week. The Commissioner of Taxation said, look, the game's right, you can move forward. And so, really, the Labor Party would have expected us to respect their mandate if they'd won, and they had a whole raft of policies, and I admit that they took to the election, and you'd have to take them into account. They should really just clear the decks of this one, Annalise. It's done, it's dusted, move on. And if I can be so bold as to give a small lesson in politics, your battle is not in the first 6 months. Your battle is down the track. Your best thing is to settle yourself down and get to that spot. And
not block tax cuts. It's a 101 rule in politics.
Yeah, it's so easy for us to fight against it. You know, these guys won't give you money. Simple. And every argument in every pub every night.
When one of the things you've argued for over many years is a big infrastructure spend, particularly on dams. The governor of the RBA couldn't be more clear in his push for that. Will you be arguing internally for a bigger focus on infrastructure?
I have all the way through my career. I think I've given it in both main speeches. It is ridiculous in a drought. The one thing you can do is build water infrastructure. Now, they say pipes, and I've heard people say pipes. Pipes just move water effectively that's already there. You have to increase our capacity. You have to increase just because our nation is so much bigger than it was in the past, and we haven't built major water infrastructure. And we have to be a nation that has the vision to take the big infrastructure project, which is taking water from the north of Australia via the Burdekin, via the Flinders, via the Thompson, into the Warrego. It's what's called...
Does it frustrate you that most of the focus that I can see has been on the cities and on roads and easing congestion? Obviously a big issue, but it's something you've been talking about for a long time, is that water infrastructure.
Yeah, what happens is you will not make Sydney... It doesn't matter how many roads you build. If you run out of water, it's a nil-sum game. Sydney now is going to water restrictions. Tamworth, if we had an extended Chaffey Dam, would have run out of water. Armidale, which they said would never have water restrictions, got water restrictions. We've got Murrurundi, it's out of water. Gyro, they're trucking it there. What else do we need? What more of a clarion call do we need than the states, because it's their resource, to combine with the federal government and get these dams being built? You can't talk about it anymore. You've got to get the dozers moving and get the things being built. And I believe if you do that, the Australian people will go on the journey with you.
Now, RBA Governor Philip Lowe was quite specific that there needed to be more infrastructure built in the regions. To Kieran's point, why hasn't this been a focus previously? Why hasn't the government done more on this sooner?
Well, I think we have in the past, Annalise, to be fair. I remember fighting for the $10 billion through the ERC, which we got, which is building the inland rail. That is a major piece of infrastructure. There's been discussions in regards the first stage of Hell's Gate up in the north of Australia. We do need, we've had substantial investments that have been put into the Seymour to Toowoomba Road. I saw that in the budget, and the Newell Highway out in the seat of Parks. And also there's $140 million on the table for the New England Highway. But that right now, but that goes on the back of things such as the Muswellbrook bypass that the state's doing, the Scone bypass, the Bolivia Hill realignment, major works down at Newcastle to get the Pacific Highway going, continuation on the Bruce Highway. But you're dead right. If we want our nation to evolve from Sydney, Brisbane, Melbourne, then you've got to start investing and making sure your tertiary education facilities, your water infrastructure, your roads are up to scratch in the regional areas, so that when people have a real reason to bring up their families in Tamworth or in Busselton or in Geraldton or in Rockhampton, we have to do that if we want to grow this nation across.
As a former Deputy Prime Minister, what would be your number one ticket in terms of infrastructure? What would you like to see the focus? And the second, related question is there room to do that, to do what Philip Lowe's saying, but still get that holy grail of the surplus?
I think there is. What we need is the smarts, which we can do. And I refer to Leo Hilshire, who was head of Treasury in Queensland for 46 years. So he's got the runs on the board. And if we set up the corporate entity like the Snowy Mountains hydroelectricity scheme, the corporate Snowy Mountains Hydro Corporation, and started building the Bradfield scheme, we don't have to do it immediately. We can do it over a number of years, which means it could be an off-balance sheet investment by the government, a corporate entity for which the guarantees for water could cover your loan payments, noting that interest rates are so low that would have that capacity to really have a vision for this nation, drive it ahead, have the debate down in the chamber about the best way to do this. Wouldn't that be an absolute joy?
Now, when it comes to the Senate, that's where a lot of the focus is at the moment. We know there's a casual vacancy with Senator Denis leaving.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think Jim Molan should be returned to that seat? Or?
I tell you what, I think the National Party should absolutely have a position 2 and a position 3. Look, I like Jim, he's a good fellow, but I was really disappointed that looked like we could have compromised the National Party's 3rd position, which has been won by Perrin Davies from Deniliquin, at the expense of what was, I believed, a partisan game that went against the interests of a coalition. Now, if Senator Denis steps out to become the US ambassador, and good luck to him, seems like a good gig, then we've got to make sure whatever change happens next, that is beyond dispute, that position number 2 goes to the National Party, because otherwise we're going to have a position 3 and possibly a position 3. And that means we're in a tenuous position, and, that's just not acceptable.
So you're saying this Senate spot should be, the casual vacancy should go to the Nats?
If it's position 2, it comes in the next cycle, and that's the Nats position. Yep. So how can you be giving it to a person from the other party?
Has Michael McCormack been fighting for that?
Look, I can't speak for Michael, and I don't know what goes on behind closed doors. But, I believe that I, as others, will be vociferous about this and making sure that people clearly understand the tenor and the sentiment of what is being discussed, openly between members of the National Party.
And in terms of the Nats leadership, are you comfortable with Senator McKenzie becoming the deputy leader in the Senate? She's also the deputy leader of the Nats. Was that the right call?
Well, it's an election by the members, and I'll respect that. I think it is important that as we have a number of states that combine to be the National Party, there is no federal National Party, there are state-based organisations, you have to take that into account.
Did you vote for it?
Did I vote?
Yeah.
Well, you can't. It's a secret ballot. I wouldn't even tell you if I voted for who I voted for at a federal election. I might have voted for myself. It's my business.
I think you might have. Thanks so much, Barnaby Joyce, member for New England.
Yeah.
We appreciate it. Thanks so much.